Most men make the first fatal mistake without even realizing it. They give themselves away too quickly. They are too available, too attentive, too eager to prove their interest before the woman has even felt the slightest impulse to earn that privilege. And this, according to Machiavelli, destroys the perception of value before the relationship even has a chance to be born. Because in the game of power, and if the dynamics between men and women are also a power game, what is abundant is never appreciated. What is always there waiting, always ready, becomes part of the landscape. And no one chases the landscape. We only chase what seems difficult to obtain, what appears valuable, limited, and selective. This is where calculated scarcity comes into play, one of the most powerful weapons a man can use when he wants a woman to value him, respect him, and pursue him. It is not about disappearing, nor about punishing her with silence. It is something much more refined, almost surgical, the ability to control your availability so that every interaction with you carries weight, intention, and meaning. Machiavelli would say that the man who controls access controls the perception others have of him. If you are always accessible, you are not chosen, you are taken for granted. But if you are scarce, not out of need, but out of strategy, you become valuable. Calculated scarcity is based on a psychological principle that governs all human beings. Desire intensifies when we feel we could lose something, and this is where so many men fail. They believe that to attract a woman, they must show everything, give everything, make everything easy. But what truly awakens feminine pursuit is the feeling that you are not a prize that is handed over. You are a privilege that must be earned. Every message you answer with urgency, every moment of instant availability, every display of neediness reduces your value in her mind, not because you are less, but because she perceives you as someone who has no priorities of his own, someone willing to abandon his life for the smallest amount of female attention. Machiavelli taught that the most powerful ruler is the one whose presence is strong enough to be desired, but scarce enough to be respected. That is the formula you must apply here. It is not about withdrawing your energy, but about managing it intelligently. When you reduce your availability, you are not being cold. You are creating a mental space where she begins to think about you even when you are not present. She starts asking herself why you have not appeared, what you are doing, what you are focused on. That small gap, that air between one interaction and the next, acts like a psychological magnet. What is not immediately accessible becomes more intriguing, more attractive, more desired. In addition, calculated scarcity sends a silent but powerful message. You have a life, and it is a life that does not revolve around her. Far from pushing her away, this awakens something deep in her emotional nature. A woman is drawn to the man who has purpose, direction, and control over his time. If you are not always available, not because you are playing games, but because you are genuinely busy building your own world, your value multiplies. She begins to see you as someone with standards, as someone who does not give his attention randomly, as someone who selects, and whatever a selective man gives becomes a treasure. But calculated scarcity also creates contrast, and contrast is an incredibly powerful emotional tool. When you are moderately scarce, any moment of full presence feels more intense, more real. There is no saturation, no monotony. Every interaction becomes an experience she feels she must care for, use, and protect gradually, without you doing anything. She starts investing more, asking more, looking for more signs from you, because she feels those signs carry value. And when a woman perceives value, the pursuit begins. And not a desperate pursuit, but an elegant, emotional, curious, consistent pursuit. Machiavelli stated that he who controls the rhythm controls desire. And the rhythm here is simple. Not always being there, not giving everything, not appearing every time she snaps her fingers, maintaining just enough distance so she has to move closer, maintaining just enough silence so she has to speak, maintaining just enough availability so she has to ask for access. And the more she invests, the more she feels she must protect what she has invested. Calculated scarcity does not only awaken desire, it also awakens respect. Because a man who knows how to manage himself is a man who demonstrates emotional mastery, and that mastery is magnetic. It is the kind of presence that stays in her mind even when you are far away, the kind of presence that makes her check her phone, that makes her wonder whether she is doing enough to get your attention. And it is precisely at that moment, when she begins to feel she must earn you, that the power shifts and the role of the pursuer begins to reverse. Machiavelli understood something most modern men have forgotten. The human mind does not obsess over what it fully knows, but over what it cannot completely understand. And when we talk about feminine desire, this rule becomes even more powerful. A woman does not get tangled up with the man who says everything, who shows everything, who reveals everything in the first encounter. She becomes tangled with the man who leaves questions unanswered, who uses strategic silences, gestures that seem casual but hide intention. Mystery is not the absence of information. It is the calculated presence of small signals that awaken imagination. And when imagination activates, your emotional presence in a woman's mind grows without you having to move a single finger. Machiavelli would say that mystery is not simply being difficult, it is a form of power. Because the one who controls what he reveals and what he conceals controls the narrative. The woman who tries to understand you, interpret your silences, decode your decisions, ends up investing emotional energy in you. And every time she invests energy, she becomes more connected. Mystery becomes an invisible thread that ties her, a soft but inevitable trap. Not because you deceive her, but because you make her participate in a psychological game she feels she can win, yet never fully resolves. To build this mystery, you do not need to act like a dark character or invent a personality you do not have. Machiavelli would never recommend a false mask, but he would advise revealing your world with moderation, like a king who does not show every room of his palace. A woman wants to know who you are, but she does not want you to give it all away. She wants to discover it. She wants clues, not monologues. She wants scattered signals she can piece together, not desperate confessions that kill the suspense. If you open up too quickly, she feels she already has you. If you reveal only 30%, she feels she needs the other 70%. That is where the pursuit begins. Mystery is also built through actions, not only words. Your ability to disappear at the right moments, your skill in not reacting predictably, your calmness when she tries to provoke you emotionally. A woman tests limits. It is part of her emotional nature, but the man who has power does not react instantly, does not break, does not run after explanations, does not justify himself. He responds only when it makes sense, when it is strategic, when it reinforces the image of a man who cannot be easily manipulated. That throws her off, intrigues her, hooks her. A man who does not fall into her game becomes the game. But mystery is not coldness, it is depth. It is showing that there is more to you than what appears on the surface. It is maintaining an air of purpose, of inner independence, of direction. A woman becomes fascinated by men who have a rich inner world, a goal they follow, a cause they pursue with discipline. Machiavelli taught that a ruler must be difficult to read to maintain control over those around him. In attraction dynamics, the same rule applies. Do not allow her to predict your every move. What is predictable is boring. What is unpredictable is addictive. When a woman does not know exactly what place she holds in your life, her mind works to figure it out. And while it works, you settle deeper and deeper into her attention. Observe the men women chase. They are not the kindest, nor the most available, nor the most expressive. They are the men who carry the vibe of, I don't know exactly what this man thinks, but I want to know more. They are the ones who never show all their cards. They are the ones whose life does not revolve around a woman, and therefore she feels she must earn her place in it. Mystery becomes even more powerful when you understand the value of silence. Silence in a confident man is stronger than 100 words from a needy one. Silence shows control. Silence shows that nothing rushes you. Silence shows that you decide when to speak and when to hold back. A woman remembers a well-placed pause far more than a desperate speech. And in those pauses, she imagines, and what she imagines traps her more than any truth ever could. As a woman tries to decipher you, mystery creates an emotional tension that keeps her hooked. Not negative tension, but the tension of desire, curiosity, and pursuit. She wants to know what you truly like, what you think of her, what bothers you, what moves you. And because you do not say everything, she stays, she tries, she puts in effort, she watches you more closely. Machiavelli would explain that the mind that pursues is a mind that feels challenged. That is why, when you are a balanced mystery, she feels she still does not fully have you, and that drives her to get closer. And here is where a natural transition to the next truth appears. You cannot generate mystery if you do not have something bigger than a woman in your life. Because mystery unleashes its true power when it comes from an independent man, a man who is not defined by female attention, a man who has his own direction. That is when mystery stops being a technique and becomes an authentic trait she perceives without you saying a word. Independence, according to Machiavelli, is not simply the ability to be alone. It is the ability to govern yourself without the opinion, approval, or affection of a woman becoming the compass of your existence. In a world where many men live obsessing over the message she didn't answer, the gesture they misinterpreted, or the attention they feel they lost, independence becomes the rarest and therefore the most valuable quality. Machiavelli would say that the man who governs himself first is the only one capable of influencing others. And it is precisely this internal mastery that makes a woman not only admire a man, but pursue him. When a man shows that his time is limited, that his goals call him, that his life does not depend on female validation, the woman perceives a kind of power that cannot be faked. She can see when a man acts independent to impress her, and she can also see when that independence comes from true discipline and a life guided by purpose. Machiavelli claimed that the most difficult kingdoms to conquer were those whose rulers did not allow themselves to be swayed by flattery, vanity, or impulsive emotions. The same happens with the man who possesses an inner empire. That man is impenetrable, and whatever is impenetrable is always irresistible. Independence does not mean indifference, it means priority. When a man gives priority to his growth, his discipline, his personal mission, the woman begins to wonder what place she holds in such a solid and self-sufficient world. And when a woman begins to wonder about something, she also begins to pursue, because human nature, as Machiavelli explained, moves through the need to resolve uncertainties. Mystery is not enough if structure does not exist, and structure is not enough if distance does not exist. Independence is precisely that mixture of firmness and enigma that forces her to move toward you instead of away from you. But this independence can only be born when a man stops measuring his worth by female attention. Machiavelli taught that a weak ruler is one who constantly seeks approval, for he becomes manipulable, predictable, and easy to control. In the same way, the man who wants to be pursued must not become someone whose mood changes depending on whether she wrote to him or not. He must be a centered man, capable of maintaining his direction even when emotion invites him to deviate. A man like this does not need to prove anything. His presence alone reveals that he is neither desperate, nor excessively available, nor willing to sacrifice his own greatness for a connection that has not yet been earned. And this is where female psychology comes into play. A woman is drawn to a man who is already complete because that kind of man does not demand, does not beg, does not chase. He does not need her to want him in order to keep advancing. And precisely for that reason, she begins to want him. Female desire feeds on intrigue, and intrigue feeds on the perception of value. There is no greater perception of value than a man with a life so rich that she wishes to become part of it. It is then that the instinct of pursuit awakens. But an independent man is also a challenging man, not a toxic or manipulative challenge, but a natural one, a man with clear goals, high standards, and a defined character. She knows she must put in effort to win his attention. She knows she cannot conquer him with the same tactics that work on ordinary men, and that challenge ignites something within her. Machiavelli would say that difficulty makes conquest sweeter, and that desire grows in proportion to the obstacles. In other words, when you are not easy to obtain, she feels you are valuable. When you do not depend on her, she feels you are stable. When you do not change your path to please her, she begins changing hers to get closer to you. And this leads us inevitably to the next Machiavellian principle, one that merges naturally with independence, the art of mystery as a psychological weapon. Because a woman only begins to pursue when she has not completely deciphered you. Machiavelli stated that in every human relationship there is a cruel but inevitable law. He who feels less governs more, not because indifference is a virtue, but because emotional control dictates the direction of behavior. In the game of attraction, this becomes even more visible. A woman who pursues a man intensely does not do so because he is superior, perfect, or unreachable, but because she perceives, consciously or unconsciously, that he has not been fully conquered. This perception triggers a natural reaction in her psychology, the need to obtain what she does not yet possess. The man who falls into the trap of giving all his attention from the beginning becomes predictable, linear, and emotionally exposed. And the worst part is that this absolute availability turns him, without realizing it, into the vulnerable side of the equation. Machiavelli would say that the prince who reveals his need loses the loyalty of his people. Likewise, the man who exposes his desperation loses a woman's fascination. She may appreciate him, she may even care for him, but she will stop pursuing him, because there is nothing left to reach, nothing left to conquer, nothing left to prove. This is why inverted emotional investment is a delicate art. It is not about playing games, but understanding the psychological structure of desire. If she feels that you are the one investing more, her instinct to pursue immediately drops. Not out of malice, but because the human mind works this way. What feels secure loses urgency. On the contrary, when she perceives that you maintain a certain emotional distance, when she sees that your life does not revolve around her, when she senses you can walk away if you are not given what you deserve, something inside her activates. She begins to question, she begins to imagine, she begins to pursue. But this dynamic does not require coldness. It requires balance. It is a way of showing that your world is wide, that your priorities are many, and that your identity does not depend on her approval. A man capable of holding this kind of presence becomes a magnet because he transmits something rare, self-value. And that self-value, in Machiavellian logic, is power. Not oppressive power, but power born from personal mastery. She observes that she cannot manipulate him easily, that she cannot fully predict his reactions, that she cannot anticipate whether she has him secured or must try harder. That slight uncertainty forces her to act. But now, the interest begins to move from her side. She becomes the one who initiates, who seeks, who asks, who wants to know more. She looks for signs, interprets your silences, analyzes your gestures. The emotional investment that used to be yours now begins to be hers. And here a fascinating phenomenon emerges. The more she invests, the stronger her bond with you becomes. Machiavelli knew this. Human beings value most what they have fought for. What costs something is appreciated. What is given without resistance is forgotten. But this principle only works if you keep your essence intact. You cannot pretend to be secure while your inner world is built on dependency. You cannot project calm when your mind is chasing desperate scenarios. Inverted emotional investment requires you to rebuild the way you see yourself. You must see yourself as someone valuable, as someone who brings something to the table, as someone who can walk away if the situation does not benefit him. And not out of arrogance, but because you have a life to protect, a mission to fulfill, a path to advance. When this mindset becomes authentic, you are no longer acting with the intention of manipulating. You simply behave as someone who prioritizes himself, but she feels it. She senses it in the way you speak, in how you react to her tests, in how you do not crumble when she pulls away a little to measure your interest. She perceives that you are not the type who trembles at the thought of losing something that is not yet a real commitment. She senses that you do not compete, that you do not beg, that you do not fall apart. And it is precisely that quiet strength that awakens her instinct to move closer. She starts thinking about you more often. She starts making more effort. She starts showing you sides of herself. She does not reveal easily, and most importantly, she begins to fear losing you. But that fear is not destructive if you handle it responsibly. It is simply the natural reflection of a new emotional direction. She fears losing you because she has already invested time, attention, energy, and desire. She has projected possibilities, imagined scenarios, and now she feels she is close to obtaining something valuable, but she does not have it completely yet. That almost is the engine of her pursuit. That not yet is the fire that drives her forward. That feeling that you are a prize that requires merit makes her more dedicated, more present, more involved. And when emotional investment comes entirely from her side, something deeper happens. She begins to see you as a man of category, a man who does not give himself at the first compliment, a man who binds himself to himself before needing to be chosen. The dynamic changes, the energy shifts, the pursuit begins from her side, and you become the center of her attention, not because you demanded it, but because you inspired it through the controlled distance Machiavelli considered essential to maintain any kind of psychological power. In the end, it all comes down to understanding a principle that Machiavelli knew better than anyone. Power is never given, it is built. When you master your inner world, when you manage your energy, your presence, and your availability with precision, you do not have to chase anyone. because it is the woman who begins to chase you. Not out of pressure, not out of manipulation, but because she feels she is in front of a man who cannot be conquered easily. A man with purpose, a man who does not collapse under desire, a man who represents a worthy challenge. She feels attracted to your mystery, your independence, your calculated scarcity, and the emotional investment that now comes from her side. And when a woman invests in you, when she feels there is still something left to discover, when she senses she could lose you if she stops trying, then she makes you a priority. That is how human psychology works. That is how desire operates. That is how power is maintained. But this is not a dirty game. It is a reminder. You do not need to be cruel or distant. You need to be a man with criteria, with boundaries, with self-worth. A man who understands that love is not won by begging, but by inspiring. And once you master this dynamic, you will never again wonder how to make a woman chase you, because she will be the one who fears letting you go, who seeks your presence, and who sees in you what so many men lose by revealing themselves too soon: the magnetism of a man who knows he is enough.